So Twitter just got rid of their basic auth functionality. So this week I'm going to show you how to set up a Rails app with open authentication, or OAuth. Now the first thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and create a Twitter application. You can do that by going to twitter.com/apps, and then you just register a new application. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're just going to put in some basic information here to configure our application, and just kind of see where, I'll just walk you through the process. Now, there are a couple of important things here. The application type needs to be a browser, obviously, a browser app, not a client app. Client app is something like a desktop application. It needs a callback URL. The callback URL is just where it's going to go to after it's successfully authenticated somebody. And we want read and write privileges so that we can update people's status, add friends, all that good stuff. So anyway, it looks like we had a problem here. It needs a description. So let's go ahead and fix the description. I think you can just put anything in there you want. I don't know that there's a minimum 10 characters. And it looks like there's a problem with the callback URL, but I like solving these things one thing at a time. So we're just going to go ahead and submit our app. All right, so it still has a problem. It looks like it's a problem with the callback URL. Now, what I think I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take it out. And the reason that I'm going to do that is because we can specify the callback URL when we set up the request for the OAuth. So it's not a big deal. We'll just take it out and go ahead and move on. All right, so now it says that we were successful. So we're just going to go ahead and copy this information here. We need the consumer key and the consumer secret in order to access the API. The rest of those URLs are actually built into the Twitter gem, which is what I'm going to be using to connect to Twitter. But if you were going to hit the Twitter API directly, then you'd need to know what those URLs are. So let's go ahead and fire up TextMate. We'll open up the Rails app that I've already created here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new configuration file. My convention is to call it app_config.yaml. And we'll just go ahead and put that consumer key and consumer secret in here. Now, if you're not familiar with YAML, or if you haven't seen the keys in YAML specified with a colon in front, all that does is when you call YAML.load, or when you call YAML.load, what happens is your keys will be symbols instead of strings. And for some reason, I just like that better. I can't specify or quantify why, but anyway. So we have the configuration created, but we need to load it into our application, and the environment.rb is the place to do that. Again, I just usually put it into a constant called app_config, and we just set up a YAML.load. Now, YAML.load, we just need to read in the file and hand it off. So we'll just, I guess we can just reference it by directory name. So we'll do file.dirname __file specifies the current file. So what this does is it chops off the last / and anything that's after it. So we need to append the / and then app_config.yaml. And now that I've done this, I've realized that I actually need a string here and not a file name. So we're going to do file.open, and we're going to request some read permissions. You do that by passing it a lowercase r. And then if you do a .read, then it'll pull the contents of the file in and cast it as a string, and then YAML.load can read it appropriately. So anyway, now that we have the app config in, we're ready to get going. So let's go ahead and generate a Twitter controller. The controller is going to need basically 3 views or 3 actions. index, login, and finalize. The index action is just going to have a link to log in. The login action is where most of the action happens. That's actually going to send the user over to Twitter so that they can authenticate, and then finalize is what will take what Twitter gives you back and generate your authentication tokens. So we can go ahead and edit login, but actually what we want to do is we want to set up that link first. So we'll go ahead and open up Twitter's index.html, and we're just going to put the link in here. And this link is obviously going to go to /Twitter/login. All right, so now if we fire up our server, then we can go to our Twitter index page. And we actually want to pull this up in a browser, so let's see. So localhost 3000 /Twitter. And it looks like we didn't set up a route for /Twitter. That's right. It doesn't do that by default anymore. And I'm not going to go set up the route. So we'll just go ahead and click the link. And it took us to Twitter login. Yay, hooray. So then what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we'll set up login so that it does what it's supposed to do. And the first thing we actually need for the login is we need an OAuth consumer. And I like to kind of build that into a little helper method or private method on the controller. So we'll set this up. We'll set it up to memoize. So we'll do an or equals here. And Twitter actually has, the Twitter gem has the OAuth stuff built in. So we'll just go ahead and create it. Now we're using the configuration options because we need that consumer key and consumer secret. So all right, so now that we have that set up, let's go ahead and close the method off here. Now that we have that done, we'll go ahead and come into login, and we're going to generate our request token. The first thing that we want to do, though, is we want to set up a callback URL so that Twitter knows where to send the success response back to. So we'll set it up to come back to the request.host. That way, if we're in production, it can be www.whatever-your-domain-is.com. And in this case, because we're doing it in development, I want to use the port as well. And if it's port 80, it's kind of pointless to have it specify a port. So we're just going to do a little smarty pants thing and check if it has a request.port. Or if the port is 80, then we won't put the :80 in there. But if it's 3000, then obviously we want that in there. And we're going to tell it to go to Twitter/finalize. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to set up some session variables with a request token in it. And the reason that we want to do that is because then it will carry through for when they send the response back. Because, you know, the session should be constant between the two requests. So you know, there are two parts. There's the request token and the request secret. And pretty straightforward how you get that information out of there. All right, now our OAuth consumer object actually has an authorized URL in it. As part of the request token. So we're going to set that aside in the redirect URL. Now, when I was working on this for another project, I figured out that it doesn't prepend the HTTP:// on it. And if you do, in Rails 3 at least, if you do a redirect to and it doesn't have that HTTP:// on the front of it, then what happens is it'll actually go to localhost 3000 api.twitter.com, blah, 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 instead of just going to api.twitter.com, which is what you want it to do. So basically what we're doing here is we're making sure that it starts with the HTTP:// and then we can just redirect to that URL and it'll all work fine. So let's go ahead and go back out to the browser, and if we refresh our page here, we can see that we got an error. So let's go ahead and look at our code here. Now, last time I had this problem, it wasn't actually a problem with the callback URL, but it was actually a problem with the configuration on Twitter's end. So if we head over to twitter.com/apps again, and we edit our application here, then you can see here that it was set to client. Now, I think the reason it did that was because we didn't specify a callback URL. So we're just going to go ahead and do that, and it looks like it worked just fine that time. So we'll just double check it's set as a browser. So we'll come back over here and refresh, and there we go. So now if we come down here, we can go ahead and click the allow button, and that should take us back to the finalize page, which it did. And you can see there's an OAuth token passed there, and we're going to deal with that in just a minute. So let's go ahead and set up finalize here. And basically what we need to do here is we need to do an authorize from request, and then we use the request token information that we saved off into the session. So we're going to use the token, the secret, and then a parameter that was passed in that is the OAuth verifier. And from that, our OAuth consumer is then smart enough to figure out what our auth token and auth secret are, and that's what we use to actually authenticate to Twitter. So then what we want to do is we actually want to collect the profile information for the current user. And this is something that I really like about the Twitter gem. I was using another gem. I'm not going to tell you which one it was, but I was using another gem. Actually, I probably ought to. It was Twitter 4R, and I couldn't figure out how to get this information out of it. So this is nice that you can actually do this .verify credentials, and it'll actually give you back all of the information, including the last post to Twitter, or the last tweet, I guess. Now, we want to clear out the request token information and the request secret information, so we're actually going to just set those back to nil in the session. They won't do us any good now that we've got the auth token anyway, and I like to clear things out so it doesn't clutter up the session. So then what we can do is we can set up the auth token, and you just get that the same way you got the request token. It's just OAuth.auth token, and the same thing for the secret. Now, one thing that you should note about the auth token and auth secret is that Twitter doesn't currently expire these, which means that as long as if you store them in your database, you can actually keep them indefinitely, and it'll just work. Now, they may change that later on, and if they do change that later on, then you should probably build it into your application to be aware so that it can handle that. But right now, let's go ahead and display this profile object that we've stored in here, as well as the auth token. Now, I realize that putting up an auth token to my Twitter account probably isn't the most secure thing, so you can pretty much count on me deleting that as soon as this screencast is published. So anyway, you'll note that we didn't set up an auth token instance variable, so we're just going to go ahead and do that now. And then we're good to go. So let's come back over here and refresh, and it looks like there is no method error. Authorize from. Okay, so we just need to fix that, and then we can go back and we can refresh again. Undefined method base for Twitter module. Okay, so again we need 2 colons there instead of a dot, and I think that'll work. So if we refresh again, now we're getting unauthorized. And I think that's probably because our verification token has, or our OAuth verifier has expired, because everything looks good in the code. So let's just go ahead and back out. Go ahead and authorize the application again. All right, so you can see here that we have all kinds of information. We've got the date that my account was created. We have my username. We have all kinds of other information that's really helpful for determining what kind of information we need, basically to identify the account, and we can store that in the database or do whatever we want with it. So finally, I like to have a little method here that provides us kind of a client connection to Twitter. And what it does is basically it authenticates or authorizes our OAuth consumer from our access token and authentication token and authentication secret, as opposed to going through the whole rigmarole here. And so if you've stored the auth token and the auth secret, then you can just pull them out, stick them in here, and you are off to the races. So you just do the OAuth authorize, and so from there you just do the Twitter base.new, you pass it the OAuth, and you're good to go. New Relic is the leading provider of application performance management tools for Ruby and Java applications. Thousands of companies use New Relic RPM to monitor, troubleshoot, and optimize applications deployed either in the cloud or in dedicated hosting environments. RPM Lite is free, fully supported, unlimited time version available at www.newrelic.com. All the leading Rails companies use New Relic, including 37 Signals, AT&T Interactive, Shopify, OurStage, IGN, and lots more. This episode is sponsored by Jumpstart Lab. Jumpstart Lab offers private and corporate training in Ruby, Rails, and related technologies. They're experienced educators, not just good developers, and will get you going quickly. Courses can be scheduled in the U.S. or around the world and curriculum customized to meet your needs. Learn more at jumpstartlab.com. Hey everybody, this is Charles Max Wood. RailsConf or RubyConf is coming up, and I'd really like to go. I want to pick up some new things that I can talk about and meet some other Rubyists that are there. So if you're planning on going and you'd like to meet me, or you appreciate the work that I'm doing here at Teach Me to Code, then please go to the Pledgey link that's included in the show notes and just donate $5 or so. I would really appreciate it, and that'll help me get to RubyConf. I've got the ticket, I've got the hotel taken care of thanks to June Yu over at RubyHead, and all I really need left is the airline ticket. So if you could help me with that, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks.
That was wonderful.
Bravo!
I loved that.
Oh, it was great.
Well, it was pretty good.
Well, it wasn't bad.
Well, there were parts of it that weren't very good, though.
It could have been a lot better.
I didn't really like it.
It was pretty terrible.
It was bad.
It was awful.
It was terrible.
Get him away!
Hey, boo!
Boo!